All right, hey everybody. So I've got a lot of requests to discuss how to record a MIDI instrumental or how to get these cool backing tracks that I get for a lot of my videos. So I figured I'd just show you guys straight up how to do it. And I want to start from square one. First thing you need to do is obviously you need to get a decent program. I use Cubase Artist 9.5 as you can see in the top. But there are a lot of different options you can get. I mean, they're going to be relatively expensive. Cubase Artist was like $150 with a discount, so you're going to be expending a decent amount in the first place. If you have something like GarageBand, as far as I'm aware, you can't really make the same quality beats as you will on better programs. So that's step one. Step two is to make sure that you have some sort of audio interface connected. I'm going to be starting from square one, so people have never done this before. Going to get every single piece of information I can because I've been doing this for a few years and I've gotten a lot of stuff on my own. So the first thing you need to do is get an audio interface, and that can be a bunch of different things. For me, it is just my microphone. The way that works is because there is actually a headphone jack inside of my USB microphone, my Blue Yeti. But for many people, they get this kind of like box that lets them plug in different instruments and stuff directly, and that's where they get all of their interactions with the program go through that interface. So the first thing you need to do is get that interface. Step two is then to connect the interface, and this is something that I had to figure out on my own. It literally took me hours. So you have to go to Studio. Remember, this is only going to be for Cubase, but there are going to be a lot of crossover applications here in different programs if you use something like Pro Tools. So the first thing you want to do is go to the studio setup thing, and you want to make sure that your thing is connected. So here you have to make sure that it is checked. So go to your control panel and then make sure that your interface is checked as the input and the output. Well, I guess in my case, maybe it's different if you don't use a microphone, but you want the input and the output to both be that if you're using a Yeti. I'm not using it right now as an input because I'm recording with my Yeti for this video, so I don't want the input to be changed because then you won't hear me. But you want to make sure those are both checked if you're normally doing this. Then you want to make sure that this is active or whatever. So you would go here and then you'd hit active like that. But I'm not using a mic right now, so. And then the last thing you would do you would go to audio connections, and you'd go here and you'd make sure it's connected in your audio connection section on both the input and the output. And you can control each one there, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that's like the boring stuff straight out of the way. Now we can get to the actual instrumental. I'll put timestamps in the description so that you can jump around if you already are familiar with how to connect an interface and stuff. So the first thing you need to do is know the tempo of the song you're doing, and you need to know something about music because figuring out the correct chords and notes to be using is going to require a certain level of musical knowledge. So I'm going to be doing Done For You by Charlie Puth because that's the one I did in my video where people were asking. That's what I'm going to be remaking right now. I'm not going to be copying anything from my other production. I don't remember what I did except for the bass sound, but we'll get to that shortly. But the first thing you need to do is set the tempo to be the correct thing, and also make sure the time signature is correct, because if the song's in 3/4, which would be ba 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 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3, it's going to be easier to work with if you switch this to 3/4. We're not going to be doing that because the song is in 4/4. I think it's 112. I looked this up right beforehand. And now we're going to go to VST Instruments because the song starts with a synth pad. Sounds kind of like an analog synth, and a hi-hat. So we want those two things going at once. So you can start with either one. I guess I'll start with the drums just because it'll be simple. So you go to your VST Instruments, which is under Studio. You right-click, or you can hit the arrow thingy up there, I think. You right-click, and then you hit Groove Agent SE. That's the newer one. Groove Agent 1's like the old one. Now, this basically just leads to a lot of trial and error type of experience, but you have all these different presets. So if you pick one of these, you're going to get a set of different sounds, so that maybe this would be like a hi-hat opened, and then this would be a kick drum, and this would be like a snare. You can't really know all the sounds, like what they're going to be. I have saved one of the ones that I enjoy using for pop music as Poppy. This will inherently come with a pop drum kit, which will work relatively well for the Charlie Puth song. So now you have to switch to the drawing implement tool. This is one way to do it. There are many ways to do things here, but this is just going to be the way I'm doing it. So you want to generally give a bunch of space before you actually start, just in case you want to add stuff. You don't have to like shift everything later. So you just leave extra space. I maybe start on like measure 9 or something like that. And then we have to keep in mind that the hi-hat goes every, I think it's every 8th note. So this is divided right now into 16th notes up here. So that means that there's every beat. So ba, 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 ba is divided into 4. So if we did 4 here, that's 16th notes. But we want 8th notes. And also they're kind of quieter in the beginning. So you could highlight them and then hit Shift Control and drag down to make them a little bit less loud. That's going to be a good volume for us. And then I like to just copy and paste. There are different ways you can do this as well. So now let's play it back. So that sounds like the intro. And we're going to go back here. If you double click on this and then you hit the arrow on the right here, then it brings it in full screen. So that's a useful tip. I think if you use this, yeah. So if you hit this middle button and just drag, it'll continue making them for you and copying them along. So now we have the intro. Drums pretty much done. I know it's just a hi-hat, but it is what it is. Now we want to do the synth pad. So there are a lot of different tools you can use for synths. Like these are all synths right here. The most basic thing to use is Halion, but it will give you the least quality sounds. So it's kind of like a trade-off. They're not bad, but if you wanted to design your own synth sounds, then you're going to want to go to something like Prologue, which is the default one I go to. But just for sake of simplicity, we're going to start with Halion. And then, so now that you have this open, you want to make sure it creates a MIDI track. So this track here, this red track, and I'll make the drum track yellow so we get contrast here. This red track is going to be the keyboard part for the intro. And all of these are going to be different sounds that you can use. So if you have a specific sound that you want, let's say you want a synth that sounds kind of like atmospheric, like Charlie Puth's does at the beginning, then you would type in pad and maybe one of the default. Generally, these GM ones are a little bit less high quality. But let's just start with one and see what it sounds like. Now we have to program the chords. And this is where stuff can get tricky. And you definitely have to go back and listen to what you're working with many times. So he's using jazzy chords in the intro here. Now I'm going to have to go see what it sounds like at the beginning because I don't really remember. Let's see. I think it starts on a B and goes to a G sharp, if I'm correct. So that would be... You just have to like, I mean, if you're doing it by ear like I do, this is basically the way I do it. I think that sounds right. Yeah, that's right. And he also has it come in 1/8 note early. So if you hear it goes, dun, dun. So that's why I put this a little bit early. This is all by ear, so it's not going to be perfect. This synth pad that we're using right now does not sound the best to me. It's a little too warm almost. His is like, I don't know, it comes in with a small attack and then it fades out. A good one, just like a good basic sound, is the compact pad. And then you have different synth controls. You'll have to experiment with this. Cutoff basically is going to like, I don't know a lot of these technical terms. I just know the cutoff as the thing that makes it sound. If you have the cutoff really low, it's going to sound like muffled. If you put it up real high, it's going to sound distorted. So his sounds pretty muffled at the beginning. It's like boom, boom. So I'm going to put that there and see what... That sounds pretty good. And he's using jazzy chords here. I like to use my guitar as well to help with this. See, so that's a C sharp, so make sure that's a C sharp. Yep. If you want to make a B minor, you start with the B as the root note, and then you want to go to the third, which would be a D, and then you want to go to the fifth, which would be an F sharp. So we're getting close already. So it starts with the B minor, but I'm pretty sure these are all jazz chords. So the way you make a jazz chord is you put it to the seventh. So if there's eight notes in a scale, the seventh note will be added, which would be a note that kind of conflicts with the root note, which is the B. So that would be a, let's see, an A, I believe. See how that kind of sounds like a little jazzy? That's what we're going for. I think it's a G sharp. Let me double check. Okay, so it sounds like the higher notes in this song all stay the same. So he doesn't actually change the chord completely in these sections. It's just the bass note that continues to move. So again, it's just trial and error. You got to listen to stuff and see what works, unless you're going to be an expert in music theory, which I doubt most people are. So it starts at the seventh. I think everything will be the same here except for the bass note, but we'll have to see. It sounds right. So let's copy and paste this again. And I think this part is where it changes. It goes. Let's see what it does in the song. And things aren't always going to be perfect. Just keep messing around. So this is not correct, but you get the picture. I'm not going to go through every single tiny detail. But now we have to go on to the main beat, which is actually the easy part because there's a lot less jazzy chords going on in the song. So I think the drums are actually really, really simple here. A good way to make drums sound a little bit more realistic is to take every other eighth note and make those a little bit quieter. It's not going to make too much of a difference with really fake sounding hi-hat like we have here, but for some of the more realistic ones, it will make a huge difference. This one's intentionally kind of electronic sounding because we're going for like a pop song. So it's just going to be a straight up beat here, and I'm pretty sure that just repeats straight up the whole time. There is percussion in the background, which is kind of what makes his music a little more unique. And we can get into that later, possibly. So now we have to do the bass groove. So a good way to start with that is to duplicate this track. And now you have another MIDI track here that you can work with. So to make sure that you're doing this correctly, you make this another color. Put this number to number 2 so you're not using the same sound as this previous part. And I've discovered that a good pop bass sound is going to be dance bass, at least for this Charlie Puth song. The bass is also very simple in this song. It's just going to be doom, 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 doom. That's pretty much the whole thing, but then changing the root note. Dum, 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 dum. Remember, B to G sharp. So dum, 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 dum. And it goes to G. Dun, 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 dun. So you'd actually think this bass part would go just down to the C sharp normally. But if you actually listen closely, it goes an extra octave down. This isn't going to sound good unless you have the correct equipment and everything. And sometimes it might be better to even double this up and have like a lighter version playing up on top on the regular octave. But in his song, he actually makes it go an extra octave down below. For whatever reason. I guess it adds a little bit of an emphasis. Those are little details you can notice if you really listen closely to music, but you have to make sure you go over it with a fine-tooth comb and get every little detail. It can be tough, like I said, in the jazz chords, but with stuff like bass, it should be a little more easy to pick out what the notes are. This is just going from memory. I haven't listened to it again, but... So, this is like the main beat here. And then you just, you copy and paste this because it goes through it again. But then, believe on after 8 measures, this part comes back in. So you actually would take this part from the beginning and then paste it in. I'm just gonna skip to the chorus now. So I'm pretty sure the chorus does everything the same except it adds one extra synth here. So let's duplicate this track again. And this time it actually uses a synth brass sound. So let's solo this part here. Make sure you switch this to number 3 so we're not overlapping sounds again. And then click on the third one. And then let's go to synth brass and see if there's something here we might be interested in. Synth Brass 2, maybe that's a good one. His is a little more quick, I think. So a way you can help deal with that, attack. You see how it says time next to it? That's a good indicator that it'll be how long it takes for the instrument to reach its full capacity. So you hear how there's a little bit of a wow. If you lower the attack, generally that will make the instrument come in a little bit quicker. So you hear that, how it's even faster. We want it somewhere in between there. So let's try and... There we go. I think that's perfect. Then the rhythm of that part is actually down, wow, wow. I'm pretty sure, so wow, 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 wow. So let's see. You can test around with what the rhythm's supposed to be, but I kind of just have it memorized from just the layout is, I can just see in my head where stuff's supposed to be. Just keep getting these in here. Again, that chord, these last 2 chords are not correct, but I'm not here to spend an infinite amount of time on little details. So then some other details you need to be aware of. So we have all of these sounds panned directly to the center and at full volume, but sometimes you need to balance things a little bit better. And a good way you can make your mix sound more huge and more balanced and just better all around is to move the panning to different places. So you won't be able to hear it because I'm recording on a mono mic, which means there's only one input source. You're not going to hear the omnidirectional capabilities of stereo panning, but the more you move this to the left, it'll be coming out of only the left speaker if you're 100 to the left, and only the right speaker if you're 100 to the right. It's pretty rare that you want something 100 either way. Usually that's reserved for backing vocals and stuff like that. But I'd recommend maybe doing something like 40, and then for this part, maybe like 30. You know, you can test around and see what sounds good to you, but maybe I'll bring this a little less, 41. So then if you listen back, also this is a little dry, as in there's like no reverb, which is probably not what I want. Release isn't technically reverb, but it will help hold out the notes a little bit longer. There you go. You hear how it hangs out a little bit longer? Maybe a little bit more than that. Okay, so now let's put this all together. Let's turn down this because I can't really hear the drums. So I'm gonna turn down the synths. So that's like the most basic, tutorial that I could do for this type of thing. I can start to go more in depth with some stuff if people are interested, but we'll have to see how this video does and if there's any interest in that topic. Again, you're gonna have to need some backgrounded music, or at least have a good ear for telling what sounds good and what doesn't, and what sounds accurate, because getting jazz chords transcribed into programs like this can be pretty difficult. Oh yeah, and if you want to do audio, you right click down here and then you would put add audio track. I'd pick mono because I only use a mono mic. And I mean, it's technically capable of stereo, but I use it for mono purposes. And then any effects you would want, you'd put there. Like if you wanted compression or reverb and all that stuff, you can put that there. And then here you would get EQ. So you can put, this would be better for a voice. Again, there's a lot more stuff I could talk about. I'm going to cut it here. Let me know if you guys are interested in seeing more, if this was informative, and what I could do to improve my presentation. Thank you very much, and have a great day.